Hi guys, welcome. My name is Amanda for those of you that are new to the channel. For those of you who've been here before, welcome back again into Friends and Family Gear Day. Today is going to be an all about storage of food pantry day because I am in the middle of packing away our bulk food orders, and it's the food that I've been collecting for several weeks and months that I need now to start to divide up into smaller packages because I'm opening the big bags. The 25 kilo odd bags of flour can't sit on the floor for an extended period of time. It's okay for a week or two, but then they do need to be bagged up into different sources. I can also put them into the big food storage barrels, but then they're too heavy for me to lift from the downstairs area up here. So I use something a little bit smaller when I'm working in this area, which is my nook at the end of my kitchen, my pantry, my working canning area, everything like that, my storeroom. Okay, so let's have a look at a few different options that we use here. So at the moment, I'm doing the dry stores. I've already put away lots of fresh produce onto the shelves for the canning, but we will look at that in a moment. But I'm doing dry stores, okay? So these bags are fantastic. They are a paper bag on the outside, but they are completely lined inside. So, and they've also got this ability to be zip-locked and reopened if I need to. But they can also be sealed because of that plastic lining. They can then be heated across the top. These are not Mylar bags, but they can be heated across the top, and that can seal them as well. These bags are available I buy them from Amazon. I buy them in a variety of sizes. These are the big ones, 30 centimetres by 40 centimetres. I'll put a link in the description on where I got them from. But the reason I like them is because the viewing window, okay? Some people do like that, some people don't. I personally like it. I can see my product straight away, and it makes it easy to identify in a shelf when they all look the same. Also write on my bags what they are. So this one happens to be 2 kilos of all-purpose flour. So the flour comes in a 25 kilo bag. I measure it out, and then I bag them up into smaller sizes that I can then use throughout the weeks that I'm using them up here as well. So that's how I store the flour, and I have loads of flour being stored at the moment. The baker's flour, same thing, it gets bagged up as well, and I put on it its protein content because they do vary for different brands as well. This one here is Manildra, which is a flour from New South Wales, I believe, but I picked this one up again from Costco, so it's $25 for a 25 kilo bag of baker's flour. So it's not hugely expensive, but it is if you start to lose 2-3 bags of this stuff. Plus, if I do separate them like this, and if it was to get any kind of infestation with insects or anything in it, then it's usually restricted to a single bag. The flour that's in the smaller sizes, when I purchase the 5 kilo bags, for example, they go in the freezer, and that turns into these. Okay, so I freeze them for a few days to kill any larvae, and then I bring it out to room temperature again, and then I seal them into these bags, squeezing out as much air as I can as I go, and then I seal across the tops and date them, etc. And then they get stored into the dry store cupboard, which is just a huge big old bookshelf down the back in a cool area, not a problem. It's dark, there's no windows in that room. It's completely surrounded in a Besser block area. It's the closest thing we have to a cellar, so it works for us for long-term storage of these kind of items. If this is not going to be vermin-proof, okay? So if this was to be stored outside in a shed, for example, or in an area where you potentially could have rats or mice, they will chew through these bags. I have no doubt that they would. But for us keeping them inside, it's not an issue. If I had snakes, sorry, I do have snakes. If I had rats in this house or mice in this house, they would have to be the most talented animals. All right, back to food storage. Food storage in glass jars. Okay, so these guys here are my large half-gallon or 2-litre jars. These ones are old-fashioned variety from Salisbury & Co. I have had them on the bench here for the past year. They are getting clinked and clanked around quite a bit, and I haven't had any problems with them. I have heard some people have had problems with them. Maybe I'm a little bit more gentle with them. I don't know, but I haven't had any breakages or any problems with any of the jars that I've purchased. They're easy to refill, and for me, across this area that I work in, I keep all of my ingredients that I use frequently. So my bread flour, for example, which is, a 25 kilo bag, I break it down into a smaller size. So that's my bread flour, and that's for just daily use. Okay, so that gets refilled pretty often from a smaller container. Things that I would use often, cream of tartar, cookie mixes, semolina, corn flour, those types of things, and sugar get used pretty frequently. So they're all stored here where I use them often. And I work in this area frequently, most days, several times a day, either in this area or off to the kitchen if I'm doing any of the canning. The canning, which is all what's going on behind, is for the wet food storage. So that's protein and low acid vegetables, as well as all the jams and things that are water bathed. So storing in the glass jars is a good way when I'm using things on a regular basis. So these ones can be vacuum sealed as well. Everything around me is vacuum sealed or pressure canned as well. So if I'm doing dehydrated vegetables or fruit or herbs, those types of things, then I use my dehydrator here, which is constantly on getting foods dehydrated. But then I need to deal with what do I do with all of the products that I'm dehydrating. So mostly I vacuum seal them into the 2-part lids as well. I vacuum seal ones, especially ones that I'm not going to be using on a regular basis. Ones that I do use on a regular basis, like parsley, for example, has just got one of the removable lids. Okay, I'm not particularly worried about long-term storage of parsley. I grow it out in the garden. We can dehydrate it anytime we want or we need to, and keeping them into the glass jars. These are stored in that cupboard in the distance there at the top and throughout the cupboard, and so they are stored in cool, dark places out of the way. So that's where I keep the dehydrated products. It's also where I keep a whole bunch of canning products. The canning jars are all in a room. I've shown it before. We have a single window here, as you can see, but there's a blind over that, and when I turn off the light, this room goes into total darkness. So I don't have an issue with light affecting any of the jars in this pantry area. So large cans, so A10 cans, these big guys, 2.7 kilos of apples. I can't use 2.7 kilos of apples or even 2 kilos of apples all in one sitting, except maybe for the cheesecake at Christmas time, possibly, but still unlikely. So if I was to purchase these big cans, which I do because they don't cost as much money, and I can then break them down into smaller sizes, like that size, which is a pint, which is a lot easier, and that's been re-pressure canned as well. They can be water bathed either way, doesn't make a difference. These ones have all been re-canned. This one was water bathed for 15 minutes and resealed. All right, so the smaller ones have been pureed, and I don't have any pureed ones left. So that's one way that I restore the big cans of things like fruit, for example. Another way that we do some storage is vac sealing, and I think most people would have a vac sealer by now or are thinking of getting a vac sealer for doing so many things, whether it be dry foods or whether it be something simple as 7 vegetables going into the refrigerator to extend their life. The same thing, a vac storer is amazing. So this particular one does the bags, and they come in a range of sizes, or you can get rolls and you can make your own. This box came with bags, which was really good. This is the El Cheapo version because my good vac sealer is at my daughter's, and they're using it for sealing up their bulk meat. So this one here was just a cheap spare one that I have on hand. It came with 100 of the bags, which get used on a frequent basis. And then I have our big bags, which get used frequently as well. So this size here, which I'll show you what they look like. We are vac sealing rice, for example, and I keep that in the lower stores area as well. So instead of a 10 kilo bag of rice opened, I re-vac seal that into smaller quantities. So these bags are about 2 kilos of rice instead. I vac seal them. I then put them back in the original bag that I purchased the rice in because it held the rice initially. And then it gets stored into one of the food crates down in the lower area, once again, in a dark, cool area. And then I've got rice throughout the year. And this all saves me needing to go to grocery stores on a regular basis. And it also saves us a lot of money with our groceries, because I do check before I buy in bulk that it's still cheaper to purchase in bulk. It's not always cheaper to purchase in bulk, but when it is, it's definitely worth the effort. Items like nuts, for example. So when you first purchased a bag of nuts, they've already been stored with nitrogen and no oxygen in them. But the moment you open them, you start to run the risk of them becoming rancid and going off. So they need to be re-vacuum sealed. Again, I purchase in bulk because it is still much, much cheaper to purchase that way. And so a bag of nuts, which is, again, this is a kilo, just under a kilo of nuts. And these were cashews. They now need to be resealed into smaller containers. I have kept ones that I eat on a regular basis, which is almonds. I've kept them out because they're roasted, so it really doesn't serve any purpose to try to increase the shelf stable length by doing roasted nuts, but fresh nuts do store particularly well, again, by vacuum sealing them. There are portable vacuum sealers that you can pick up as well. This one here for doing our jars, and so I use those as well for doing lots of items. But even to do dairy, like cheese, for example, mozzarella I buy in bulk, cheddar I buy in bulk. So to buy the cheese, slice it all up, put it in the freezer, perfect to be vacuum sealing it. Sugar's a little different. It doesn't like to have no oxygen. It will turn into a rock hard brick if you do it. This one here is caster sugar that is in a container that has got an oxygen absorber way down the bottom here, and it is rock hard, but I can fix that. That's not an issue. I can break it back up again, sift it, and I'll still end up with, now that I've broken its seal, so I've just got some lovely large pieces that just need to be broken up again. It's not too much of an issue because it's a small container. It's a couple of kilos. It's not the full 25 kilo bag that it was originally. So, and that's close to the kitchen because I'm using it regularly. Does much better sealed just in a Ziploc, a really good strong Ziploc bag. Notice no lumps, moves around easily. Much better idea than putting a air absorber, oxygen absorber, or sealing them in an airtight container. Sugar doesn't like it. Sugar turns back into a rock. While we're talking about bags, Ziploc bags, huge different amounts of sizes, shapes, but it's all about its ability to be used for what it needs to be used for. So this style of Ziploc bag's perfect for short-term storage, you know, in the cupboards, you know, or making snack packs out of those kind of things. Something small that you're not going to be storing for very long because these are not exclusive of oxygen getting into them, so they're only very temporary. Also, if you freeze in these, the products will still get freezer burn. So they're not especially good for freezing with unless you are using dedicated freezer bags. Okay, so the freezer bags have got a completely different feeling to them. They're much thicker and they don't allow the oxygen exchange, especially in a freezer. So your food is better protected if you're using the correct kinds of Ziploc bags, for example. So I use the freezer ones for anything going in the freezer that's not getting back sealed. And then I just use these standard ones when I'm temporarily storing things in the refrigerator, for example, or if for whatever reason I'm not back sealing. So they come in a huge different range of sizes, but they're a really good option as well for short-term storage. So then that brings us to the big ones, the big containers. What do you use? So food safe storage containers is a must-have item. So for example, spices, herbs, flowers, that kind of thing, go into these food storage containers. And when they are new and you first lock them down, of course, then that makes the product inside airtight as well. These are opaque, so they don't allow the transfer of so much light. So it's what I use for my spices, and I buy most of the spices in larger quantities, big bags of them, for example. And So they're okay stored on a shelf for a long period of time. And then when you do access the packaging inside, I reseal the packaging. So I keep the spices inside stored in their spice bags. I'll open one. So this is the white peppercorns, which I only used this morning. So it needs to be re-vacuumed, or rather resealed up. So I keep it in its original packaged bag. It has a small split on the side, and I simply go along and I reseal that with the back sealer, with the sealing part of it. So I can reseal the bags over and over again. And eventually when I run out of bag, that's okay, I'll just transfer them into a different bag and seal that bag. Still keeping the original packaging because it's got their use by dates and all that stuff. But it really doesn't matter because once you open them, you completely change those dates anyway. But that brings me to the storage area downstairs, which I will show you one of the big crates. So in the storage area, we have some large storage crates, just like foot crates. And within those crates have got divisions, and then I store some of the food that I don't want to be able to see on a regular basis. So potato chips, for example, might be stored down there. Chocolate might be stored down there. Excess jars of peanut butter, coffee might be stored down there, things like that, that I don't need to have 6 jars of coffee in the main cupboard up here in the house taking up all of our space, because the big jars of coffee are pretty expensive now and also getting more and more expensive, and they take up a lot of space. So they tend to be stored away and then I can get access to them later on. But we'll have a look at one of the foot crates. So in my downstairs area, I have these crates. They are Rhino brands. They are well insulated. They keep everything inside lovely and cool and dust-free. Keeps the vermin out as well, which is exactly what you want if you're storing food for a longer sort of storage period of time. Things like cereals, for example, I'm quite safe to put them in here and I'm not concerned. These have got a lovely seal on them, so I'm not concerned about putting food items into this crate, for example. So we have a couple of them. So things like chocolate, I know it's not melted, it's lovely, nothing wrong with it. Our UHT milk, spare rice, there's 10 kilos of rice, there's noodles, pasta, chips, peanut butter, pasta sauces. Always keep a spare animal food just in case it's a bag of cat food. And again, sauces, crackers and chippies, and just snacks, just some leftover things that I don't want in the main pantry area. That's one of the crates. And you can also use empty eskies when they're not in use, or you can use an old refrigerator that's no longer used, that's working. Perfect idea to store a few items. Lots of glass jars for long-term food storage, as in preferably sort of 12 months-ish, or can be longer, but most recommend 12 months for storing of stocks and things like that. So our wet products on the shelf can be anything from chicken to beef to salmon to vegetables to sauces, jams, you name it, it's probably here, soups, etc. So there's a wide amount of items stored just on the shelves as well, but they're all in glass and they've been vacuum sealed, or they've been pressure canned or water bathed canned as well. So there is a lot of food storage in this area as well, but that's just another way to, again, store some foods as well, especially bulk when we buy chicken. So we can do ugly chicken, which is just the raw chicken packed into the jars up the top there, or I can pre-cook it and turn it into, say, a mince, for example, instead. So they're beef and pork savoury minces instead. And that's salmon. So that's fresh salmon that has been pressure canned. Instead of taking up space in my freezer, it's in a jar instead. So spices, I tend to keep the spices sometimes in their original packaging, depending on the size of the packaging and whether or not I need to break it down into smaller usable amounts. But generally I purchase in large quantities and then I put them into the size that we need to use just for the general kitchen use, okay, for all of those recipes that you see me making using all of the different herbs and spices. And once again, for freezing, cheese, etc., or freezing items, definitely vac sealing helps with all of that as well. Even things like garlic, for example, anything that goes into the freezer, I prefer to vac seal. Even bakery items get vac sealed. That's a banana bread, for example. Anything that stays in just a standard Ziploc bag, this is the result. Ice within the bags. These bags have been sealed and they're just chock full of ice. So the products in them, unfortunately, are not viable. Luckily, that's lizard food. That's called the blue tongue, so it's not an issue for the lizard to have a little bit of extra ice. But I certainly don't want things like the bacon that we've smoked to end up the same way. So we vac seal everything from vegetables as well as cheese, meats, etc. And I'm currently going through the freezer, just doing more and more because it's just one more job that needs to be done. Rightio, moving on to what is just the normal pantry. So not so much bulk items, but just storing food in general. And geez, didn't I have a mess in here, and still do. I'm still sorting through. But I'm 4'9" and I can barely reach on tippy toes this shelf. Okay, so this is where all the sauces that I use during marinades and things like that are kept. And I use a ladder usually if I need to get up, but I've not been allowed to use ladders for several years. And so my husband's been responsible for looking after the top shelf. And every time I ask him when we do check through the shelf dates for things is to let me know if there's anything expired. And my husband's a bit of a hoarder, but I didn't realise he was a food hoarder as well. But I did know he had some interesting items stored at the back up the top there, which, you know, I can't even get to. So I got hold of the ladder a couple of days ago and I went for a little bit of a look-see. Now, I never have any expired food when it comes to the bulk products because I know what they are and they're items that I buy because I use them so often. So that's a really good lesson. If you're buying something in bulk, be sure that it is something that you are using enough of to justify the purchase. Came across all of these items in the back of that top shelf. Okay, unfortunately, they're all getting discarded. So this is just money down the drain as far as I'm concerned, because it's not they've just expired. Let's be real. They are seriously expired. And it's, you know, it's probably my fault as well that he doesn't like to throw things out. This guy, I don't know if you can see that date there, that says April 2009. We're in 2025 at the end. This one doesn't even have an expiry date, and I don't even remember the last time we purchased that. This was gifted to me back in 2010, for goodness sake. I remember when it was gifted to me, and its expiry date, although it's just a cooking syrup, it's probably fine. Its expiry date was 2013. Again, long time ago. This one is probably a me problem. I don't see that this one, which is chicory and coffee essence, I don't think that this product, even though it has way gone beyond its expiry date as well, it would have been used for a cake at some point in 2018. I'm not sure whether or not that item is still okay. So it's going in the might keep section yet, but everything else is going. Even this gherkin spread. Why have we got gherkin spread? We don't use it. It's gone past its use by date, and I know it's sealed, but we don't use it. So there's no point keeping food that we don't use. All of these items keep in refrigerator after opening, not being refrigerated. Some of them don't even have tops on, so they can't be kept. This one, I mean, that's not even a half a teaspoon. Why is that in the back of the cupboard? You know, hello. Oyster sauce, no date on that one. This one is 2013, however. Again, I don't use a lot of oyster sauce. I probably did once when we were doing big barbecues for even larger family and friends, but all of that, unfortunately, will be going into the bin. This one, I'm not too sure about. It'll just go aside for now. But sadly, all of that needs to be thrown away. And that is unfortunately what happens when you do store a quantity of food. It's a habit that I developed from, I suppose, my mum. If you'd seen my mum's kitchens and her freezers, this is like nothing. This is the tip of an iceberg. At least it's all contained. And I always try to keep it to one pantry. So this is my general stores pantry, not my bulk items. Prefer to keep things in their own packages for exactly that reason, because of the use by dates can easily be seen. So I turn the packaging around so I can see use by dates on items and things like that. These ones that can't be a use by date because they're only new. Don't know what this code is. I've checked the can inside, it's on the can as well. These are not even 4 weeks old. They're oysters for Christmas, so they wouldn't want to be 2013. Use by date, can't be. All right, back to it. So try to keep things in their original packaging, try to keep things organised, and frequently going through the pantries to see what's being hidden. What is hidden in here that I didn't know that I had was, thankfully, I found, is a box of ice cream cones, because I was about to purchase some. So, you know, that's an unopened package. So it's a bit of a score when you go through your pantries and you find things that you didn't know was there. All right, so that's storage of a main pantry, just simple, nothing exceptional, just standard kitchen pantry, everything stored in containers. If they're in these containers, it's because they get used pretty frequently. So a container of rice like that will only last 2 sessions, 2 meals in the rice cooker. The bottom one is sugar and the top one is corn flour. Everything else is stored in glass and everything is labelled that's not in its original packaging. So definitely recommend looking at all the wastes that we have, that you do keep a close eye on dates if you have got things stored in strange places. Like I can't reach up here. I can just get my fingertips into that one. That's the joys of being not even 5 foot. Alrighty, back to the rest of the storage options. Which brings us to just simple plastic food containers. So as long as it's excluding air getting into them, there's nothing wrong with temporarily using something like a plastic food container to store your products. Another good thing to use is plastic PET bottles, so drink bottles. If you wash them out, they're good to fill with beans and things like that as well. I don't have any of that because all my beans have been stored and vacuum sealed instead, so I haven't needed to use the plastic bottles, but I do have some plastic bottles that have got large amounts of water stored in them as well. So I figure if I'm keeping the plastic bottle for whatever reason, I might as well fill it with water and store it. So I've done that several times, and I use the water usually when I'm doing a ginger beer bug, that I need to have water that's excluded from chlorine, for example. Now, in the pantries and in the cupboards behind me and throughout the kitchen, there's lots and lots more food, including the buffet that I'm standing in. That's where all my cans are stored. So in a cool, dark place, that's where all of the commercial cans that I've purchased are stored, of things like lentils and beans and things like that, things that we can't grow or we don't grow. And so they're stored in a cool, dark place as well. As I said, all the dehydrated products, they're all stored in the cupboard in the cool, dark area. They're all being vacuum sealed unless it's something that I'm using on a regular basis. So otherwise, they are just kept in a cool, dark place and they can stay there forever. That's fine until I'm ready to use them. So big food storage containers, the really large ones that hold the 25 kilo bags of flour in the main bottom room are the big ones from Bunnings, and I'll put a clip up of those ones, and they're food safe. It's really difficult for me to get the tops of them off, and I can't lift them. That is a problem as we are getting older, I guess, that I got issues with carpal tunnel and wrist problems, as well as knee issues. So, you know, lifting 25 kilos, my knee surgeon would just be mortified at the thought of that when I'm on a 5 kilo limit, which I exceed pretty regularly. But I like these guys. So these are really cute. These are 5 litres. They're not much, but you can put lots of smaller items into a smaller container and these stack. So these are also options as well. If you keep what's inside it vacuum sealed, then this just provides that extra protection against vermin. It would be unlikely that rats are going to chew through something like this to get to the plastic bags that are sealed inside, but it's possible that they could, which is why I always have a second area inside sealed up as well. So that provides you with another choice of the smaller crates, and these come in all different sizes, from small right up to the big 150 litre ones, which we use as well. You can get deep ones, shallow ones, you get ones that fit under beds, you can do all of that. I'm not doing all of that kind of stuff, although I might have some food in my bed, but they're sneaky things, you know, kept in the drawers so that other people don't have the temptation to eat them. But generally speaking, I don't hide food, and I'm certainly not a prepper, and I don't profess to be a prepper, but we do spend a fair bit of money a couple of times a year purchasing food, and that food is in bulk, and that food then needs to be used and not wasted, because it's throwing away money, and that's something that nobody wants to do. So having a few different options for food storage, it's pretty handy. Glass, I think, is a perfect option for storing food. Pressure canning and water bath canning is a great way to preserve food throughout the seasons that are in abundance as well. And then if you are buying in bulk, having the ability to store the food, because it's not saving money if you are discarding food. So having the ability to store the food either in a freezer or in the fridge, if you're storing it in the fridge, or vacuum sealing it or using containers to store the food once it's opened. Because buying a 25-kilo bag of flour itself is not expensive, but no one is going to use 25 kilos of flour in a week's period. Well, most people in a domestic situation would not use 25 kilos of flour. I go through a few kilos of flour a week, but I don't go through 25 kilos, but I go through about 25 kilos every couple of months. So it does need to be stored because we don't shop every month. So I think that pretty much covers it. We've done jars, we've done glass, we've done the Ziploc bags, we've done the vac sealers, we've done these pouches, which I love the pouches. I've said that a few times, and they come in a range of sizes. You can get Mylar if you want to spend the extra money and get Mylar bags. They are the silver foil bags which seal, and they're fine, but they're not vermin proof either. They will get eaten. So they then have to be sealed in another container like that in order to protect them. So I figure the amount of money that you're going to save buying maybe these products or something similar to these products, any kind of bag in fact, or vac sealing them, the money that you save instead of buying the Mylar bags, you can then invest in some really decent containers. I'm not saying this is a decent container, by the way. This is just an El Cheapo one, but it just happens to be the right size. Okay, go to Bunnings, go to one of the hardware stores, have a look around at the different size storage containers they've got. They do have the food safe containers and the buckets, which is where I purchase ours from. They're not expensive and they last forever. Like I said, my main problem with the food storage barrel buckets is I have difficulty unscrewing the lids off them, and I have to get somebody to help me because it is too big and it doesn't have a tool, that you can get your hands on and turn it. Unfortunately, it is, you've got to put pressure on your wrists and turn it, and I just can't do it. Alrighty, it's a few ideas on how to preserve some of the food and how to do the storage and how we store some of ours, having a look at the crate, for example, and just collecting bits and pieces over time. Simple, It's not like we've got the shipping container out the back, but that's not food safe storage area, unfortunately. That would be an issue if I was storing food out in the shipping containers as well. No, I'm not. I'm really not. Alrighty. Thanks for joining me, guys. Bye now.